The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Captain Kim Tae-ho walked through them with steady steps, his black boots clicking against the smooth crystal floor that stretched out. Before him, like a frozen ocean above him, the ceiling disappeared into darkness so deep that even the powerful lights of the chamber could not reach it. Floating platforms held alien beings of every shape and size, their eyes or sensors or whatever they used to see, all focused on the single human walking toward the center of the room. Tae-ho had seen pictures of this place during his months of travel to reach the council homeworld, but being here in person was different. The air itself felt heavy with the weight of 3,000 years of galactic rule. Every breath he took seemed to remind him that billions of beings across the galaxy had stood in this exact spot and left as servants to the council. The captain wore his best uniform, the dark blue fabric of Earth Defense Force, pressed smooth and clean. His metals caught the strange, multicolored light that came from sources he could not identify. The 12 other humans who had come with him on this mission were gone now, sent back to their ship after weeks of failed negotiations that went nowhere. He was alone with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The lead council member moved forward on its platform, a creature that looked like a jellyfish made of living metal. Its body pulsed with inner light, and its tentacles moved through the air like silver ribbons. Each tentacle was thicker than Tae-ho was tall and covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once, vibrating through the walls and floor, and even through Tae-ho's bones. The words formed in his mind through translation technology that was older than human civilization. Species designation human. The creature said, "Your kind has been observed and evaluated for the required period. Your technology level is acceptable. Your population numbers are sufficient. Your military capabilities meet minimum standards. Therefore, you qualify for membership in the Galactic Council." Tae-ho said nothing. He had been briefed on this moment for months. He knew what was coming next. The tribute system has maintained peace across the galaxy for 3 millennia. The council member continued. Every species that joins our collective contributes according to their abilities. This ensures stability, prosperity, and protection for all member worlds. Other council members began to speak, their voices joining the first in a chorus that filled the chamber. A being that looked like a tree made of crystal talked about the benefits of council membership. A creature resembling a giant spider woven from starlight described the protection that came with submission. A floating cloud of gas that sparkled with tiny lights explained how the tribute system had prevented wars for thousands of years. But Tae-ho was not listening to their words about benefits and protection. He was thinking about the files he had studied during the long journey here, files that showed what council membership really meant. The tribute demands were always the same: 20% of all industrial output from every factory, every mine, every production facility that member species operated, half of all rare earth elements and precious metals that could be used to build advanced technology, complete and unrestricted access to all scientific research and technological development, and the worst demand of all 1 million beings from each species to serve as workers in council operations across the galaxy. The lead council member's tentacles swayed in complex patterns as it continued. Your species has shown remarkable adaptability during our observation period. Humans can survive in environments that kill most other beings. They can work in extreme temperatures, handle toxic substances, and recover from injuries that would be fatal to others. This makes your kind particularly valuable for our mining operations in the harshest regions of space. Holographic displays materialized around Tae-ho, showing images of other species that had accepted council membership. The snake-like Viridians worked in massive factory complexes, their natural flexibility allowing them to build delicate electronics in spaces too small for other beings. The rock-skinned granite folk labored in asteroid mines, their bodies perfect for work that would crush any other species. The displays showed granite folk families separated as parents were sent to work in mines light years from their children. The Viridians had become so specialized for factory work that many could no longer survive on their homeworld. The bird-like Skyborn had been bred into different subspecies, some designed for high-altitude work, others modified for deep space construction. Your genetic material will also be required, the council member said. Human adaptability combined with our genetic modification. Technology will allow us to create specialized variants suited for specific types of work. Some will be modified for underwater operations. On ocean worlds, others will be changed to survive in the vacuum of space without protective equipment. Ho thought of his wife Park. So, Jin, who ran a small school for refugee children on the outer colony world of New Bizen, she taught kids from families who had fled wars and disasters, always believing that education could give them hope for a better future. What would happen to those children if humanity became part of the council system? He thought of his son Kim Min-ho, who was 15 years old and dreamed of becoming an engineer. The boy spent hours designing ships that could explore the furthest reaches of space, building models and running calculations for faster-than-light drives. Would Min-ho ever get the chance to build his ships if humans became specialized workers in council mines? The captain thought of Earth itself, where 13 billion people lived and worked and loved and dreamed. His sister Kim Hae-jin was a doctor who had dedicated her life to finding cures for diseases that still plagued the outer colonies. His brother, Park Jun-se, was a farmer who had developed new crops that could grow in the harsh soil of frontier worlds. All of that would end if humanity accepted council membership. The genetic modification programs are completely safe, the council member assured him. Your species will retain its essential characteristics while gaining improvements that will make council service more efficient and less dangerous for the workers themselves. But Tae-ho had read the files. He knew what those improvements meant. The Viridians had originally been a proud warrior culture with rich artistic traditions. Now they had been modified so extensively that they could barely think beyond their assigned tasks. The granite folk had once been poets and philosophers, but their enhanced versions could only focus on mining and construction. The council member's voice grew more formal as it prepared to deliver the final demands. You will return to your homeworld immediately. Your government will have 30 standard galactic days to begin tribute payments and worker transfers. Failure to comply will result in immediate military intervention against all human settlements. Military ships will escort your vessel to ensure safe passage back to human space. During this time, you may prepare your people for the transition to council membership. Educational materials will be provided to help your species understand their new roles and responsibilities. The creature paused, and its tentacles stopped moving for a moment. The chamber fell silent, except for the barely audible hum of ancient technology. Do you have any questions about these requirements? Species designation human. Tae-ho looked up at the massive being that towered above him. Then he looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien representatives watching him. Some seemed curious about how the newest species would react. Others appeared bored, as if they had seen this same scene play out countless times before. A few looked sad. The captain thought about everything he had seen and heard. He thought about the choice that faced not just him, but every human being in the galaxy: submit and lose their freedom forever, or refuse and face the consequences. His voice was steady when he finally spoke. I understand the requirements, he said. I will take your message back to Earth. The council member's body pulsed with satisfaction. Excellent. You have proven to be most reasonable. Species designation human. The transition period will begin as soon as you return to your homeworld. The massive doors opened again, and Tae-ho turned to walk back through them. His footsteps echoed in the vast chamber as he made his way toward the exit, but his mind was already racing ahead to the moment when he would have to stand before the leaders of humanity and deliver the council's ultimatum. Behind him, the alien representatives began to disperse, some returning to their own platforms, others gathering in small groups to discuss whatever business had brought them to the council homeworld. None of them paid any attention to the single human walking away. None of them realized that they had just witnessed the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. The Soul Pride cut through hyperspace like a knife through black silk, its engines humming with the steady rhythm that had carried it across half the galaxy. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood in his quarters, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. But his mind was far from the beauty of faster-than-light travel. 3 weeks had passed since he left the council homeworld, and every day brought them closer to Earth. Every day brought them closer to the moment when he would have to deliver the Most terrible news in human history. His crew moved through the ship like ghosts. Everyone knew what had happened in the council chamber. The translation of the meeting had been broadcast to every human on board within hours of their departure now. 12 of humanity's best and brightest sat in their quarters or worked at their stations, knowing that their species faced a choice between slavery and extinction. Lieutenant Commander Lee Subin knocked on his door. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. Captain, we need to talk about the numbers. Tae-ho turned from the viewport. Subin was the ship's strategic officer, a woman who could calculate supply lines and battle odds faster than most computers could process data. If anyone could find a way out of their situation, it would be her. Come in, he said. Subin entered, carrying a datapad covered in charts and calculations. She had been working for days trying to find some solution, some compromise that might save humanity from the Council's demands. The tribute requirements will destroy us within 20 years, she said without preamble. Her finger traced across the holographic displays that materialized above the datapad. If we give them 20% of our industrial output, the outer colonies will start failing within 6 months. She pulled up population charts showing the 137 worlds where humans had built homes and cities and lives. The colonies need constant supply runs from Earth and the inner worlds. She continued, without those supplies, New Bizen will lose life support. New Seoul will run out of medical equipment. The farming worlds will not have the tools they need to grow food. Chief Engineer Park Dong-woo joined them in the captain's quarters. His usually cheerful face was grim. The genetic modification program is worse than slavery, he said. They are not just asking for workers, they are asking to change what it means to be human. Dong-woo had spent years studying alien technology, trying to understand how other species had developed their advanced systems. What he had learned about the Council's genetic programs had shaken him to his core. Look at what happened to the Viridians, he said, pulling up biological scans that showed the snake-like beings before and after Council membership. 300 years ago, they were warriors and artists and philosophers. Now, they have been changed so much that they can barely think beyond their assigned tasks. The engineer showed them brain scans comparing original Viridians to their modified descendants. The neural pathways responsible for creative thinking had been reduced. The sections that controlled independent decision-making had been altered. The beings that worked in Council factories were still technically Viridians, but they were shadows of what their ancestors had been. The granite folk are even worse, Dong-woo continued. Originally, they lived for thousands of years and spent centuries creating beautiful stone sculptures and writing poetry. Now, their modified versions live for maybe 200 years and can only focus on mining operations on Earth. President Choi Han-sol had not slept in 4 days. The emergency session of the Global Assembly had been running continuously since the Seoul Pride had transmitted Captain Tae-ho's initial report. Representatives from every human world attended through quantum communication links, their faces showing the strain of an impossible decision. Military Admiral Song Jae-won stood before the assembled leaders, his uniform crisp despite the exhaustion that showed in his eyes. Our fleet consists of 237 ships of various classes, he reported. Our most advanced vessels can match Council technology in some areas, but we are facing a civilization that spans the entire galaxy. The Admiral pulled up tactical displays showing the known extent of Council space. It stretched across every arm of the galaxy, encompassing thousands of star systems and tens of thousands of worlds. Their military force includes ships from hundreds of different species, each contributing their unique technological advantages. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin had spent the last 72 hours reviewing every piece of data humanity had collected about the Council. The xenobiologist looked like she had not left her research station since the crisis began. The tribute system is not just about resources, she explained to the assembly. It is about control. Every species that has joined the Council has lost their independence within 50 years. Their unique cultures disappear, their technological development stops. Their people become specialized tools for Council operations. She showed historical records of species that had tried to resist Council demands in the past. The Christic attempted to negotiate better terms. They were given a 50% reduction in tribute requirements, but within 30 years, their civilization had collapsed anyway. The Void Dancers tried to maintain their cultural practices alongside council membership, they lasted 60 years before their traditions were completely absorbed into council bureaucracy. What about military resistance? Asked Representative Kimbio Ram from the Mars colonies. Could we fight them? Admiral Song shook his head grimly. Our war simulations show complete defeat in every scenario. We could destroy some of their ships, but they have resources from 10,000 worlds. They could replace their losses while we could not. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued for acceptance, believing that survival under council rule was better than extinction. Others pushed for immediate military preparation, wanting to fight for freedom regardless of the odds. A few suggested that humanity should abandon their established worlds and flee to the edge of the galaxy. Representative Park Min-young from the Europa settlements stood up. What if we tried to hide? She asked. Could we evacuate our populations to unexplored regions of space and avoid the council entirely? Dr. Yoon pulled up star charts showing the extent of council territory. The problem is that they control all the major hyperspace routes, she explained. Even if we found empty systems to colonize, we would eventually need resources that only exist in council space. We would be cut off from galactic civilization entirely. The discussion went in circles as representatives struggled with the reality of their situation. No military solution could succeed. No negotiation would preserve human freedom. No escape route would allow them to maintain their civilization. Captain Tae Ho remained silent during most of the debates that were transmitted to his ship. He listened to the arguments and proposals, but his mind kept returning to something his grandfather had told him years ago. The old man had lived through the resource wars that nearly destroyed Earth in the 22nd century. Sometimes the most important battles are won with a single word, his grandfather had said. Young Tae-ha had not understood what that meant at the time, but now, as he faced the greatest crisis in human history, the words echoed in his mind. His grandfather had been a soldier during the resource wars, fighting against corporations that wanted to strip mine Earth's remaining natural resources. The corporations had better weapons, more money, and the support of half the world's governments, but they had lost because people like Tae-ho's grandfather had refused to surrender, even when surrender seemed like the only rational choice. Communications officer Lee Hana brought him updates from Earth every few hours. The debates were getting more heated as time passed. Some worlds were calling for immediate surrender, others were demanding that Earth's fleet prepare for war. The unity that had carried humanity to the stars was starting to crack under the pressure. Captain Tae-ho stood in the ship's observation deck, watching the stars streak by as they approached the edge of human space. In a few days they would arrive at Earth, and he would have to stand before the leaders of his species and help them make the most important decision in human history. But deep in his mind, a single word was beginning to form, a word that his grandfather would have understood, a word that might change everything or destroy everything. The soul pride continued its journey home, carrying the weight of an entire species' future in its databanks. Behind them lay the vast empire of the Galactic Council. Ahead of them lay Earth and the choice that would determine whether humanity would remain free or become another servant race in the Council's endless machine. The captain touched the communication panel and sent a message to Earth requesting a meeting with President Choi as soon as they arrived. He had made his decision about what humanity's answer should be. Now he just had to convince 13 billion people to trust him. The emergency session chamber in Geneva had never held so many people. President Choi Han Sol looked out at the assembled representatives from every human world, their faces showing exhaustion, fear, and desperate hope. The quantum communication links hummed with voices from colonies scattered across 100 light-years of space. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood at the center of the chamber, still wearing his travel uniform after landing on Earth just 6 hours earlier. The Soul Pride sat in orbit above them, its crew waiting for orders that would determine the fate of their species for 72 hours. The Global Assembly had debated every possible response to the Council's demands. The mathematics were brutal and clear in every scenario that involved submission or compromise. Humanity would cease to exist as a free species within a generation. Representative Park Jun-ho from the Titan colony spoke first. We have run the calculations 1,000 times, he said. If we give them what They want our outer settlements will fail within months. Our people will starve while we send food to Council Worlds Dr. Yun Hai. Jin stood up from her position near the scientific advisory panel. The genetic modification programs are not negotiable. She said the council has never made exceptions for any species. They will take our people and change them into specialized workers. Whether we agree willingly or not, the end result is the same. Admiral Song Jae-won presented the military analysis. One final time our fleet could inflict damage, but we cannot win a conventional war, he reported. Their technology is not significantly better than ours, but their numbers are overwhelming. They have ships from hundreds of species and resources from thousands of worlds. The chamber fell silent as the weight of their situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. Every option led to the same conclusion: humanity could not negotiate their way out of this crisis. They could not fight their way out. They could not run far enough to escape. President Choi stood up slowly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had to make impossible decisions. The numbers are clear, she said. We cannot win a traditional war. We cannot accept their terms. Without losing everything that makes us human, we cannot run without abandoning the worlds we have built. She paused, looking directly at Captain Tae-ho, who had remained silent throughout the debates. However, she continued, we have one advantage that the Council has not encountered in 3,000 years of rule. Every species they have faced has eventually submitted because they believe they had no choice. They have built their entire system on the assumption that any rational being will choose survival over freedom. Representative Kim Yoo-jin from New Bisan raised her hand. Madam President, what are you suggesting? The president walked to the center of the chamber, standing next to Captain Tae-ho. I am suggesting that the Council's greatest weakness is that they have never faced a species that would rather die than surrender. They have never encountered absolute refusal. The chamber erupted in whispers and urgent conversations. Representatives leaned toward each other, their voices creating a buzz of nervous energy. Some looked hopeful, others appeared terrified at the implications of what the president was suggesting. Dr. Yoon pulled up historical records on the main display showing every species that had challenged the council over the past 3 millennia. The Christic tried to negotiate reduced tribute payments, she said. The void dancers attempted gradual resistance. The metal singers fled to the edge of the galaxy before eventually surrendering. Every single species that has encountered the council has tried some form of compromise or partial resistance, she continued. No species in recorded history has given them a complete, definitive refusal. Admiral Song stepped forward. Madam President, a policy of absolute refusal would mean war. A war we cannot win. I am not talking about a conventional war, the president replied. I am talking about something the council has never experienced before. A species that refuses to be conquered regardless of the consequences. Captain Tae-ho finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying an intensity that made everyone in the chamber listen carefully. During my grandfather's time, Earth almost destroyed itself in the resource wars, he said. The corporations had better weapons, more money, and more political support, but they lost because people like my grandfather refused to surrender even when surrender seemed logical. He walked to the main display showing images of the council homeworld and the massive chamber where he had received their demands. The council expects us to be rational, he continued. They expect us to weigh our options and choose the path that offers the best chance of survival. But what if we choose the path that offers the best chance of remaining? Human Representative Lee So-young from the Europa settlement stood up. Captain, what exactly are you proposing? Tae-ho looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from every human world. We tell them no, he said. Not, maybe not, we need better terms. Not, we will consider it. We tell them no, and we mean it completely. The chamber fell silent again. But this time the silence was different. It carried a weight of possibility, something that had been missing from all their previous discussions. President Choi nodded slowly. We have spent days trying to find a compromise that would save our civilization, she said. But every compromise leads to the same place. The slow death of everything we are as a species. She activated the main communication system, connecting their chamber to every human settlement across the galaxy. Citizens of humanity, she said, her voice reaching colonies from New Seoul to the mining stations at the edge of known space. We face the greatest crisis in our species' history. The President explained the Council's demands in simple terms, making sure that every human being would understand what was at stake. Your leaders have debated every possible response, she continued. We have considered surrender, negotiation, military resistance, and escape. None of these options would preserve our freedom. Representative Park Min-young interrupted. Madam President, if we refuse their demands completely, they will attack us with overwhelming force. Our people will die. Yes, the President replied. Many of us will die, but we will die as free human beings, not as slaves in the Council's machine. And perhaps our refusal will inspire others to remember what freedom means. Captain Tae-ho stepped forward again. I have seen what the Council's membership really means, he said. I have seen the Viridians who cannot think beyond their assigned tasks. I have seen the granite folk who have forgotten how to create art or write poetry. The beings in those factories and mines are alive, but they are not truly living. The captain's voice grew stronger as he continued. If we submit to the Council, we will survive, but our children will not be human. They will be specialized tools designed for specific jobs. Our culture, our dreams, our ability to explore and create and grow, all of that will be taken from us. They are Yoon pulled up genetic modification records showing what happened to species after they joined the Council. The human variants they create will be perfect workers, she said, but they will not be us. They will carry human DNA, but they will not have human souls. The debate that followed was different from the arguments of the previous days. Instead of trying to find a way to avoid the impossible choice, the representatives began discussing how to face it. The conversation shifted from what if to what when Representative Kim Bo-ram asked the question that everyone was thinking. If we choose absolute refusal, how do we tell the galaxy that we mean it? Captain Tae-ho smiled. For the first time since returning from the Council homeworld, with one word he said the same word that my grandfather would have used. The same word that every free being understands. President Choi called for a final vote. The choice was simple. Accept the Council's demands and preserve human lives while losing human freedom, or refuse completely and face the consequences as free beings. The vote was not even close. Every representative from every human world chose freedom over survival. They chose to remain human regardless of the cost. They chose to give the galaxy something it had not seen in 3,000 years. Complete, uncompromising defiance. Captain Tae-ho was given new orders: return to the Council homeworld, deliver humanity's answer, and make sure the galaxy understands that some things are more important than survival. As he prepared to board the Soul Pride once again, Tae-ho thought about his wife Park So-jin and his son Kim Min-ho. He thought about the billions of humans who had just chosen to risk everything rather than surrender their humanity. He thought about the single word that would either save the galaxy or doom his species. The word was simple, but it carried the weight of every free being who had ever lived. The word was N. The Soul Pride emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Council homeworld system like a single star appearing in an ocean of darkness. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge watching the twin suns of the ancient system grow larger on the main screen behind him. His crew worked quietly at their stations, but he could feel the tension radiating from each of them. News of their return had spread faster than their ship could travel. Every species with quantum communication technology had heard that the humans were coming back with their answer. Representatives from across the galaxy had traveled to the Council homeworld to witness what everyone assumed would be another routine submission ceremony. Lieutenant Commander Lee Subin approached the captain's chair. Sir, we are receiving docking instructions from Council Traffic Control, she said. They are directing us to the same diplomatic berth we used before. Chief Engineer Park Dong-woo looked up from his console. Captain, the ship's systems are all operating normally, but I am detecting massive military formations throughout the system. The Council has assembled quite a fleet. Tae-ho nodded. He had expected this. The Council wanted to make sure that every being in the galaxy saw their power. When humanity submitted to their authority, it would be a demonstration designed to crush any thoughts of resistance that might exist among their subject species. Council ships filled the space around the homeworld, vessels from hundreds of different species, each one representing a civilization that had surrendered to the tribute system. The snake-like Viridian ships moved in perfect formation, their crews trained to think only of their assigned tasks. The massive granite folk mining Vessels drifted silently, their once proud builders, now reduced to specialized workers, but there were other ships too. Vessels from species that still remembered what freedom felt like, representatives from the few remaining independent worlds had come to watch humanity's final moments as a free species. Some had traveled from the edge of the galaxy hoping to learn something that might help them avoid the same fate. The Soul Pride docked at the diplomatic station, and Captain Tejo prepared for what might be his final mission. He wore his dress uniform, the dark blue fabric pressed to perfection and his metals polished until they gleamed. The weight of humanity's decision rested on his shoulders, but his step was steady as he walked toward the airlock. His crew gathered to see him off, each one knowing that their captain was about to deliver a message that would change the galaxy forever. Communications Officer Lee Hanna handed him a datapad containing the official response. From Earth, though, they all knew that the real message could not be written down. Chief Dongwu stepped forward. "Captain, whatever happens, we are proud to serve under your command." Lieutenant Su Bin saluted. The crew of the Soul Pride stands behind humanity's decision. Sir Te-ho looked at each of his crew members, these brave humans who had chosen to risk everything rather than accept slavery. "Thank you," he said, "all of you. Your courage gives me strength." The captain walked through the diplomatic corridors of the council station, passing representatives from dozens of species. Some watched him with curiosity, others with pity. A few looked at him with something that might have been hope, though they probably did not understand. We the great doors of the council chamber stood open, waiting for him. The vast space beyond was filled with more beings than had gathered there in centuries. Word of humanity's return had drawn representatives from every corner of council space they wanted to witness the moment when the last free species in their region of the galaxy finally submitted. Captain Te-ho walked through those doors with steady steps, his boots clicking against the crystal floor that reflected the light of 1,000 alien technologies above him. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, and around him the platforms held creatures from every world that had ever surrendered to the council. The lead council member floated on its platform at the center of the chamber, its jellyfish-like body pulsing with satisfied anticipation. Its metallic tentacles swayed in patterns that spoke of ancient authority and unquestioned power. Species designation human. The creature spoke, its voice vibrating through the chamber walls. "You have returned within the specified time period. This demonstrates wisdom and proper understanding of galactic reality." The chamber filled with the sound of hundreds of alien voices as representatives discussed the proceedings in dozens of languages. Most seemed pleased that another species was about to join the council system. A few sounded disappointed that humanity had chosen submission over destruction. Te-ho walked to the center of the chamber, the same spot where he had stood weeks earlier. When he first heard the council's demands, the holographic displays around him showed the same images of subjugated species working in council facilities, their cultures and dreams sacrificed for the stability of the galactic order. "Present your tribute schedule," the lead council member commanded. "We are prepared to begin the integration process immediately. Your species will be assigned appropriate work details and genetic modification schedules within one standard galactic month." A serpentine representative from the Viridian delegation slithered forward on its platform. "The humans will find council membership to be beneficial," it said in a voice that sounded hollow compared to historical recordings of Viridian speech. "Your species' adaptation capabilities will be highly valued in our mining operations." The massive rock-like form of a granite folk representative shifted on its platform. "Your people will contribute to the great work that maintains galactic peace," it rumbled. "The individual desires of single species must give way to the needs of the collective." Captain Te-ho stood silently in the center of the chamber, listening to the aliens discuss humanity's future as if it had already been decided. They talked about work assignments and genetic modifications, about which human colonies would be best suited for which types of council operations. The lead council member's tentacles stopped swaying as it prepared to receive humanity's formal surrender. "You may now present your compliance documentation." Species designation human. Te-ho looked up at the towering creature that had ruled this part of the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. He thought about his wife Park So-jin teaching refugee children on New Bizen. He thought about his son Kim Minho dreaming of building ships that could explore the stars, he thought about the 13 billion human beings who had chosen freedom over survival. I carry the official response of the human government, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. The alien representatives leaned forward on their platforms, eager to witness the final surrender of the last free species in their region. Some activated recording devices, wanting to preserve the moment for their historical archives. The lead council member's body pulsed with satisfaction. Present your tribute schedule and integration timeline, Captain Tay. Ho reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out the datapad that contained Earth's official response, but instead of activating it, he set it on the crystal floor in front of him. The gesture was deliberate and unmistakable. The human government has carefully considered your demands, he said. His voice was calm, but something in his tone made the chamber fall silent. Representatives who had been chattering excitedly suddenly focused their attention on the single human standing below them. We have evaluated your tribute requirements, your genetic modification programs, and your integration timeline, Tejo continued. Our response is unanimous. The lead council member's tentacles began to sway again, anticipating the formal words of surrender that every species eventually spoke. Captain Tejo looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or sensors or whatever passed for sensory organs among the hundreds of alien beings watching him. He thought about his grandfather who had fought against impossible odds during the resource wars. He thought about every human being who had ever chosen principle over safety. No, he said. The single word hung in the air like a physical presence. The chamber felt completely silent, as if the ancient technology itself had stopped functioning. Every alien representative froze in place, their minds struggling to process something that had never happened before. The lead council member's metallic form flickered as if the word had caused some kind of system error. Clarification required, it said after a long pause. Your response was not understood. Tejo's voice was stronger when he repeated himself. No, we reject your demands, all of them. We will not pay tribute. We will not submit to your authority. We will not surrender our freedom. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives from hundreds of species began talking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of disbelief, confusion, and shock. The chamber filled with sounds that ranged from mechanical clicking to musical tones to roars that shook the crystal wall. Species designation human, you appear to be malfunctioning, the lead council member said, its voice carrying a note of uncertainty that no one in the chamber had ever heard before. Perhaps your translation systems are inadequate. Our translation systems work perfectly, Captain Tejo replied, and we are not malfunctioning. We are simply free beings making a free choice. The chamber erupted in chaos. The chaos in the council chamber was unlike anything that had been seen in 3,000 years. Representatives from hundreds of species were shouting or clicking or singing in their native languages, creating a symphony of disbelief that echoed off the crystal walls. Some aliens were floating frantically around their platforms, while others had frozen completely, as if their minds could not process what they had just witnessed. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood calmly in the center of the madness, his hands at his sides and his expression peaceful. The single word he had spoken continued to reverberate through the chamber, not as sound, but as an idea that was spreading from mind to mind like wildfire. The lead council member's jellyfish-like form was pulsing rapidly, its metallic tentacles writhing in patterns that spoke of confusion and growing anger. The creature's voice, when it finally managed to speak, was no longer the confident tone of absolute authority that had ruled the galaxy. For millennia this is impossible, it said, the words vibrating through the chamber walls but carrying none of their usual power. No species refuses council authority. It is not done, it cannot be done, but it is being done, Captain Tejo replied simply. We are doing it right now. A representative from the bird-like skyborn species fluttered its crystalline wings nervously. Human, you do not understand the consequences of your words, it chirped in a voice like breaking glass. The council maintains galactic peace through the tribute system. Without it, there will be chaos, war, destruction. There is already destruction, Tejo said, looking up at the alien creature. Your people once soared through the atmospheres of gas giants, creating art from the aurora patterns they could see from space. Now your modified descendants work in council shipyards building vessels. They will never be allowed to fly the skyborne Representative fell silent, its wings folding against its body as if the captain's words had physically struck. Ida, massive granite folk delegate, shifted on its platform, the sound like boulders grinding together. Human child, you speak of things you do not comprehend, it rumbled. The tribute system has prevented galactic war for 3 millennia. Every species benefits from the stability it provides. Captain Tejo turned to face the rock-like being. Your people were once philosophers and artists, he said. You created sculptures that told the stories of entire civilizations and wrote poetry that could make stars weep. Now your children live for 200 years instead of 2,000 and can only think about mining operations. The chamber fell silent again as the weight of the captain's words settled over the assembled representatives. Many of them had not thought about their species' histories for decades or centuries. They had accepted the council version of reality where the tribute system was natural and beneficial, and questioning it was unthinkable. A serpentine Viridian delegate slithered forward, its forked tongue tasting the air nervously. The council provides protection, it hissed. Without their guidance, species make mistakes. They fight among themselves. They waste resources on unnecessary pursuits. What unnecessary pursuits? Tejo asked. Art, music, exploration, love, family, dreams. The Viridian eyes blinked rapidly as if the concepts were difficult to process. The council has optimized our society for maximum efficiency, it said, but its voice lacked conviction. Individual desires cause instability. Individual desires are what make life worth living, the captain replied. You once wrote epic poems about the beauty of movement and the joy of discovery. Your ancestors could compose symphonies with their bodies alone. Now you can barely remember your own names. Across the chamber, other representatives were beginning to shift uncomfortably on their platforms. Conversations that had been forgotten for centuries were stirring in the depths of their modified minds. Species that had not questioned the council system for generations were suddenly remembering what they had lost. Lead council member S form blazed with angry red light as it realized that something unprecedented was happening. In its chamber, the tribute system maintains order, it declared. Your species will comply or face immediate military action. Maybe we will face military action, Captain Tejo agreed, but we will face it as free beings, not as slaves, and maybe that is more important than survival. The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices carried a different tone. Representatives were no longer just expressing shock and disbelief. They were asking questions that had not been spoken aloud in the council chamber for thousands of years. A delegate from the aquatic depth swimmers raised a tentacle. What if the human is right? It gurgled. What if we gave up too much when we joined the council? A crystalline being from the Silicon reaches chimed. Like breaking bells, my ancestors spoke of a time when we chose our own paths. What happened to that freedom? The elderly representative of the gas dancers began to glow with patterns that had not been seen since before their species joined the council. I remember stories my grandmother told me. It whispered stories of when we danced for joy instead of efficiency. The lead council member S rage was growing more visible by the moment, its metallic form now blazing like a star. You will cease this disruption immediately, it commanded. All representatives will return to proper order, but the damage was already done. The word that Captain Tejo had spoken was spreading through the chamber like a virus, infecting minds that had been controlled for so long that they had forgotten they could think freely. The concept of refusal was awakening memories and dreams that the council had spent centuries trying to erase. A young granite folk delegate who had never heard the old stories about his people's artistic heritage stood up on his platform, his voice shaking with emotion. What did we create before the council? What were we before they made us into miners? The older granite folk representative looked at the younger one with eyes that were suddenly filled with tears that had not fallen for 200 years. We built cathedrals from living stone, it whispered. We wrote poems that could last for millennia. We were artists and dreamers and philosophers. The younger delegate's voice cracked as he asked, then, what are we now? The chamber fell silent as the question hung in the air. Every representative, every species, every being present was forced to confront the reality of what they had become under council rule. Captain Tejo watched the transformation happening around him. These beings had been slaves for so long that they had forgotten they had ever been free. But the idea of freedom once introduced was impossible to suppress. You are whatever you choose to be, he said. His voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. The council cannot take away your ability to choose unless you let them. And you do not have to let them. The lead council member realized that it was losing control of the situation for the first time in its existence. Your military forces are inadequate, it said desperately, trying to regain authority. Your technology is primitive. Your population is insignificant. You cannot resist our power. You are right about our military forces, Captain. Tejo admitted, we probably cannot win a war against you, but that does not mean we cannot fight, and it does not mean we are wrong. He looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien representatives who were staring at him with a mixture of fear, hope, and growing understanding sometimes. The most important victories are not won on battlefields, he said sometimes. They are won in the minds and hearts of beings who remember what it means to be free. The captain's voice grew stronger as he continued. The council has ruled for 3,000 years because every species they encountered eventually chose survival over freedom, but survival without freedom is not really living, it is just existing. A delegate from the machine civilization of the copper mines spoke up, its voice like grinding gears. Human captain, your words carry logic that we had not considered. If survival requires the sacrifice of all that makes existence meaningful, then perhaps survival itself becomes meaningless. The lead council member's form was now blazing with such intense light that some representatives had to shield their sensory organs. You will be destroyed, it shrieked. Its voice was no longer commanding, but desperate. Your species will be eliminated. As an example to others, Captain Tejo smiled. Perhaps, he said, but our example will not be one of submission. It will be one of defiance, and that example will spread to every world, every species, every being that remembers what freedom feels like around the chamber. The transformation was accelerating. Representatives were standing up on their platforms, speaking to each other in languages that had not been used for diplomatic purposes in centuries. They were remembering who they had been before. The council changed them. The skyborn delegate spread its wings and began to sing a melody that had been forbidden for 1,000 years. The Viridians started moving in patterns that resembled their ancient dances. The granite folk began to speak in the poetic rhythms of their forgotten literature. The council's perfect order was collapsing, and it was happening because one human had spoken a single word: no. The news traveled faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that spanned the galaxy. Within hours of Captain Kim Tae-ho's declaration, every species, every world, every being under council rule had heard the impossible. Someone had said noon. The mining world of Kepler 442b, where granite folk had extracted rare minerals for 3 centuries, the work stopped. The massive stone-skinned beings looked up from their excavation equipment for the first time in decades, their ancient eyes focusing on something other than ore deposits and extraction. Quota supervisor Granite Kim Dolsu had been modified for peak mining efficiency, his brain altered to focus only on production schedules and mineral analysis. But as the news reached their world, something stirred in the depths of his consciousness, something that the council's modifications had not been able to completely erase. What were we before? He asked the question aloud for the first time in 200 years. His voice echoed through the mining tunnels, carrying to the ears of workers who had forgotten that questions were allowed. An older worker named Granite Park Geum Ho stopped his drilling operation, the massive machine falling silent in the underground cavern. We were builders, he said slowly, the words feeling strange in his mouth. We built things that were beautiful, not just useful. The memory came flooding back, carried by genetic patterns that the council had tried to suppress but never completely eliminated. Images of vast stone cathedrals that sang in the wind, sculptures that told stories lasting millennia, architectural wonders that celebrated the joy of creation rather than the efficiency of production. Mining supervisor Granite Kim Dolsu felt something he had not experienced since his modification. Tears, the salt water ran down his rocky cheeks as he remembered what his people had lost. We were artists, he whispered across the galaxy. Similar scenes were playing out on the manufacturing world of Viridian Prime. The Serpentine workers began to move differently, their bodies remembering the flowing dances that their ancestors had performed to celebrate the beauty of motion, instead of the mechanical efficiency drilled into them by council. Modifications they moved with grace and purpose that came from within factory supervisor Viridian Lee. Jinho watched his workers with growing amazement as they began to sing while they worked. The songs were not the productivity chants approved by council efficiency experts, but ancient melodies that told stories of exploration and discovery. We explored the galaxy before the council came, he said to his assistant Viridian Park Hai-jin. We were warriors and poets and dreamers, we sailed between the stars for the joy of seeing what was there. The assistant's eyes widened as genetic memories awakened in her consciousness. What happened to our ships, she asked. What happened to our stories? They took them away, Supervisor Jinho replied, but maybe we can take them back in the deepest reaches of space where the gas dancers worked in. Council energy collection facilities, the ethereal beings, began to glow with patterns that had been forbidden for 1,000 years. Their bioluminescent displays had been restricted to simple efficiency indicators, but now they bloomed with complex artistic expressions that their ancestors had used to paint stories across the darkness. Senior operator gas dancer Yoon Min Young felt her consciousness expanding beyond the narrow parameters of her assigned duties. For the first time in centuries, she remembered what it felt like to dance for joy instead of efficiency. Her body began to pulse with colors that told the story of her people's ancient freedom. The Council's response was swift and brutal. War fleets mobilized from staging areas across the galaxy, heading toward human space with the intent to make an example that would crush any thoughts of rebellion before they could spread further. But the Council had underestimated the power of an idea whose time had come. Captain Taeho returned to Earth to find humanity preparing for war, but not the kind of war the Council expected. Human ships were not massing for defensive battles. Instead, they were scattering across the galaxy, each one carrying a simple message to every enslaved species. You have a choice, you can say no, Commander Park. So, Min of the exploration vessel New Soul transmitted the message to a Viridian factory world. Her ship was small and lightly armed, but her words carried more power than any weapon. We are humans, she broadcast. We chose freedom over safety. We chose to remain ourselves rather than become what others wanted us to be. You can make the same choice. The response was immediate. Viridian workers began abandoning their production lines, not in panic, but in purpose. They moved toward the communication centers of their facilities and began sending their own messages to other Viridian worlds. The songs they had forgotten began to fill the electromagnetic spectrum as an entire species remembered how to sing on Earth. President Choi Han-Sol watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The rebellion was not coordinated or planned. It was spontaneous, spreading from world to world as species that had forgotten their own strength suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. Admiral Song Jae-won brought her the military updates. Madam President, the Council war fleet is approaching human space, but something unprecedented is happening. Their own member species are refusing to support the military action. The President looked at the tactical displays showing Council ships scattered across dozens of star systems. Many of the vessels were simply stopping in space as their crews struggled with orders that suddenly seemed wrong. Granite folk mining ships were being converted into exploration vessels. Viridian factory ships were being retrofitted for artistic purposes. Gas dancer energy collectors were being used to create massive light shows that could be seen across entire star systems. Dr. Yoon Hai Jin burst into the command center, her face bright with excitement. Madame President, we are receiving communications from species we have never heard of before. The rebellion is spreading to regions of the galaxy that have been under Council control for thousands of years. The quantum communication array filled with voices speaking in languages that had not been used for interstellar communication since before the Council's rise. Ancient civilizations that had been reduced to specialized worker populations were suddenly remembering their histories, their cultures, their dreams. From the crystal cities of the Silicon reaches came messages of mathematical poetry that painted equations across the stars. The deep swimmers of the oceanic worlds began broadcasting songs that carried through the quantum foam itself, telling stories of exploration and wonder. The machine minds started calculating beauty instead of efficiency, their digital consciousness expanding beyond the narrow parameters the Council had imposed. Captain Tae-ho stood in the Seoul Pride-S Communication Center listening to the Symphony of Liberation that was spreading across the galaxy. His simple word had become something greater than he could have imagined. It had become a rallying cry for every being that had ever dreamed of freedom. Lieutenant Commander Lee Soo-bin approached him with the latest reports. Captain, the Council-S Warfleet is fragmenting. Many ships are refusing orders to attack civilian targets. Some are actively joining the rebellion. Chief Engineer Park Dong-woo looked up from his console. Sir, I am detecting massive power signatures from the direction of the Council homeworld. It appears that their central authority structure is under siege from their own member species. The rebellion that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. It was not fought for territory or resources, but for the right to exist as free beings. Species that had been enemies under the Council system found themselves fighting side by side, united by the simple desire to choose their own destinies. The granite folk used their mining equipment as weapons, converting asteroid extractors into shipbreakers and ore processors into shield generators. The Viridians abandoned their factories but took their manufacturing knowledge with them, building ships designed for exploration. Rather than efficiency, the gas dancers created energy weapons from their collection arrays, turning Council technology against its creators. But the most powerful weapon in the rebellion was not military at all. It was the word that Captain Tae-ho had spoken in the Council chamber, the word that every oppressed being understood in every language across the galaxy. No, the Council's empire, built on 3,000 years of assumed submission, began to crumble, not from external attack, but from internal collapse. Their subject species were not rebelling against specific policies or demanding better treatment. They were rejecting the entire concept of involuntary servitude on worlds that had known only Council rule for dozens of generations. Beings were discovering arts and sciences and philosophies that their ancestors had created before the tribute system existed. They were remembering what it meant to live rather than simply exist. The war that followed lasted 3 years, but its outcome was decided in the first few hours, when entire Council fleets switched sides rather than fire on beings who were fighting for the same freedom that all sentient life deserved. The Council's greatest strength, their unity of purpose, became their greatest weakness when that unity shattered under the weight of awakening consciousness. In the end, the tribute system that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia fell, not because it was militarily defeated, but because its subjects finally understood that they had always possessed the power to refuse. They had simply forgotten how to use it. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on the observation deck of the Seoul Pride, watching the